Hello, my name is Ibomor Ruth Temeka, your course teacher for CSC408, Human Computer Interface. Now we've done a couple of lessons so far before the Christmas break vis-a-vis the accreditation exercise. So I decided to put up this record in form of lectures in order to enable you to keep abreast and prepare for your forthcoming exam. I'll try as much as possible to do a quick review on what we've done so far, and then highlighting the silent aspects of the course. Then of course a walkthrough on the last topic, which has to do with the design and implementation of your interfaces. And I believe that you've already done at least 75% to 80% of your coursework, which has to do with your individual topics. Please, if you haven't done so, I need you to go through the slides which I've already sent earlier, and then listen to the lectures on video, and then do the work appropriately, because you will be given your exam most likely will be in form of case study. So please, you need to take it seriously. Okay, let's quickly go through some of the slides that we've already created. This is University of CSC. I'll go straight to the principles, which we've already done, the fundamentals. Okay, let's start with the fundamentals. Very briefly. Okay, foundations of human-computer interface. Now, what are the objectives of this lesson? You should be able to discuss what HCI is, identify and discuss the component of HCI, and of course differentiate between UI, which is a user interface, and of course user experience. We've already done that. The HCI stands for human computer interface or interaction. This is actually a question. Will you say is an interface or interaction? Now both are correct, but you need to distinguish between what an interface is from that of interaction. Now, interface is a point of interconnection between the user and the computer. That means that is the way a user uses the system, the screen in front of it. How is it designed in terms of, does it have buttons? Is it from a command prompt? Do you need to enter things using a command prompt or other means of interacting with the computer? Now, interaction is the reaction event that happens or occurs among or between the objects, that is the human and that of the computer. The interaction, what happens, how are you using it? If you click a button, what is the reaction? Are you interacting with the system or using the system based on whether you are clicking on a button or you are typing something, and when you click on the button, what exactly happens? Now, these acts or occurrences produce a new level, a new effect or experience. That means that when you interact with it, the interaction is actually the using of the system. When you use a system, what are the experiences? What are the effects? Do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel accomplished? Are you able to use the system to do what you intended doing? That is actually what we can also call the user experience. Now, the human-computer interaction is a multidisciplinary field of study. That means that it's a combination of several fields of studies, which has to do with the computer science, psychology, and so many other. We'll see that in the next slide, focusing on the design of computer technology and the user interaction with the computer. Now, this diagram gives you an idea of it. You have the computer science aspect of HCI, you have the cognitive science, which is psychology, and of course the human factor engineering, which is the development, the development of it, and then how the human is expected to use it. So you have it, and all of these aspects are important. Why? The psychology. Why do we need to design an interface in a particular way? It could be because the user has some form of what we call stored knowledge, or what we call previous knowledge, which is transferable. So when it's completely different, it becomes it makes the person psychologically unstable, because the person is at loss on what to do, even though the interface is beautifully designed. So the cognitive science is extremely important. It's an aspect or a field that contributes to the HCI development. Then of course computer science, which has to do with hardware, the technology, and all the tools that you use in designing the different interfaces. Then of course the human factor engineering. Okay, human beings are responsible for the production, the implementation of it, and the stability of it is extremely important. Now in the next diagram we have HCI, computer science, and in the computer science you have the UX and the UI. UX stands for user experience. User experience as in what impact, as what was the benefit. Okay, did I enjoy using did I enjoy interacting with the system, using the interface that was presented to me? That is the user experience. Of course the UI has to do with the user interface. My interaction with the computer via the user interface gives me what? The user experience, which could be good, bad, depending on what the way rather the interfaces are designed, how easily I was able to get information, how easily I was able to navigate, and so on and so forth. Now the foundations of it, you have basically three fundamental principles or foundations. We have theoretical principles. Theoretical principles, every field of study is backed by theoretical principles, and this theoretical principle could be what we call empirical in the sense that they form the basic, the premise on which every field is based on. For example, if you're talking about computer science, there are empirical researches. So if I need to work on an aspect of computer science, which is a database, database is not necessarily empirical. Database has to do with, if I'm now looking at it from the empirical perspective, it has to do with the calculation, data storage, data structure, vis-a-vis down to how computer actually manipulate information that is saved within it. Anyway, I said all of that to say that the same way we have the theoretical principles of HCI, then professional practices. Professional practices are those that are into HCI, that is people that have been trained. Then you are not just a computer science student or information technologist, but you've been able to create an edge for yourself. You have become an expert in the area of human computer interaction or interface. That is professional practice. What are the things you're supposed to do in terms of designing, in terms of evaluating an interface? What are the things you look out for? Now, the things you look out for here, okay, is based on the theoretical principle, the essence of what human computer interface or human computer interaction. The community of people who are those that are involved in either the developing or the usage of this, the users, the stakeholders that forms the community of people. That means the designers, okay, which are actually some of the professionals, the designers of the system or the interfaces, those that are implementing it, the users, the stakeholders. All of these form the community of people. Then you have, what are the goals of HCI? The first one is understand the factors that determine how people use technology. This is very important. The way a technology savvy will use the system is completely different from the way a partially or an average computer savvy person will use the system. They are quite different, so you have to determine that. You need to develop tools and techniques that enables you to build a suitable system. Not every tool that you see will be suitable to design interfaces for specific group of people. So the right tool selection is important. Then of course you should be able to achieve efficient, effective and safe interaction. And then most importantly, put the people first, which has to do with the usability. Extremely important. If your interface do not match up to this, then there is a problem. Why? If it's not people oriented, if it's not user friendly, then it has defeated the aim. Okay, we'll quickly go through the next slide, principles of HCI. Now, what are principles? These are the objectives. The objectives. You should be able to list and explain the principles, discuss the relevance of each of the principles, and apply the principle in the course of designing your user interfaces for different category of people, users. Now, what are principles? Principles are guidelines, standards, and considerations. That is, things that governs what you do. These are what we call principles. So they are actually they can be termed as guidelines, they can be termed as standards, they can be consideration. Guidelines, standards are usually established by organizations, professional organizations that exist within a field of study. Consideration, what are the things you think about, the rationale? What are the things that comes to your mind? What are the things that you consider before you design an interface? HCI is not only concerned with the designing of user interface, but the functionalities of the system and the role it plays along with the user. The user interface is designed by the predetermined functionalities defined in the system requirement. This is very true. You don't just go about designing interface and putting all kinds of jargons on the interface simply because you want to make it look good, or you want it to look very techy. No, your system specifications and requirement governs or predetermines how your interfaces will look like. Because if you interface actually at the more or less the front end is what the user sees. This user does not see the logical computation or the logical coding that you've done. The user is not interested in that. What the user is interested in is the look and the feel of the so-called system or the application that you've designed, and how he or she is able to get information about the application and interact with it appropriately. Okay, this is logically diagrammatized in the user and what the user cases. You already know that, because for every system there must be a user and user cases, and the user, you can have one or more users of a system, but the way each person will interact with the system or use the system varies. Now this these ways, what we call the use cases, can be translated into the what, into the interfaces of the system. Now, the principles are actually grouped into three major components. You have perception, behavior model, and the Shannon Diamond H rules. I'll quickly explain that. Perception has to do with okay, let me just read it out. The user interface must be created in a way of which it is simple enough for anyone to use it without assistance. Your perception, your view, that is what perception is all about. Your view. How does you, the designer, perceive the system? How do you think the user will perceive the system? How do you think that the user wants to use the system? That is perception. So you must be able to do what? Create things while putting into consideration the user's perspective. How will the user? How does the user intend to use the system? How do you want the user to see the system? Do you want the user to see it as a user-friendly interface, or you want it to be a complex? You want the user to see it as what? A complicated system. Yeah. So this is extremely important. A designer is likely to run the what? Interface past a lot of groups to get what? Feedback. That means that in order to get this, I can put myself in the place of the user and come up with, okay, the user may want to do this, and so on and so forth. But the easiest way, of course, is that depending on, of course, the model you're using, you can include the users in your design by giving them simple questionnaires, for them to use the system. Just quickly develop a prototype or design interface and send it to them. Let them make their own input. Ask them what they think about it, and then you will be able to make adjustments and do things appropriately. So it's extremely important, the perception, because your perception, you don't just, as a designer, you don't just design things from your own viewpoint. No, that is wrong, because you are not necessarily the end user of the system. You are designing the system for others to use. So it's not all about you, what makes you feel good, or what makes you feel that, okay, you want to show off your skills. No, that's not the essence of it. The essence is that you are designing a system for other people to use. Therefore, their perception, the way they see the system, the way they view the system, has to be put into consideration when you are designing. Now, of course, some of the elements we talk about color. I'm not going to spend so much time on this. You can read it. We have color, you have luminance, which has to do with the light. Okay, how clear are the buttons? Did you use a white color where you're supposed to use a darker color, and therefore absorbing the light, the clarity of the buttons and the write-ups? You need to put that into consideration. Are you designing for people that are visually impaired, that is people that have difficulties in seeing things, okay, or people that are using spectacles or eyeglasses? You need to put that. Are you doing it for all the elderly people? Are you doing it for the children? Okay, you put that, then you'll be able to use the appropriate color. There are some colors that are quite pronounced and sharp, and it's as though it doesn't absorb the light, rather it intensifies the illumination of the light. So you need to put that into consideration. Of course, pattern is just the template that is used by if you look at certain websites or certain applications, you can see that what you see on the home page, not necessarily the look and feel of the home page, is similar to that of the next page or the about page or the contact page. Again, the content will be different, but it uses the same color, the positioning of the bars are on the same, the same vertical or horizontal position. That's so is a template. So in order to make it universal or create some form of uniformity, you do it that way. That's for pattern. Then pop out effect also. Pop out effect is that in the course of doing it, there are prompts that comes up, and you can use that to help the user. Now, behavioral model. The behavioral model is a model or template which is often used in order to produce a brand new device or user. By borrowing elements from existing and recognizable models, a designer can greatly reduce the time needed to, for instance, let me say I'm talking about an adaptive e-learning system. There are already existing adaptive e-learning systems, of course not exactly the same. I can look at it and say that, okay, this system functions this way. I can add these elements to it and improve on it. Maybe in terms of the response time, in terms of the level of interaction, in terms of the number of inputs, ways an input can be implemented, or rather the increasing number of ways a user can make an input to the system. Instead of just making it by regular form, it could be by email, it could be by request, it could be by a straight button, okay? All of that has to do with the behavioral model of the system. In general, the functionality of the system. So you can use, you can borrow from an existing system the behavioral pattern, especially if it's similar. Let's say, for example, you are trying to design an online sales website. There are lots of online sales websites like Jumia, Konga, eBay, Amazon. There are so many of them. So instead of me to reinvent the wheel, I go to this website, study how they must have done it. Yes, I may not have a complete access to the back end. Of course, you will not. But from the interface, and as a computer science student, you should be able to determine that, okay, you can envisage that, okay, there will be a table, there will be a database, there will be a view, all right, and then use that knowledge and implement it when you want to do your online website. Very predictive element. Now, when we talk about predictive element, which has to do with before I move on, there are two aspects of behavioral. You have predictive and descriptive. Now, when we talk about predictive, is a postulated prompt. That means a postulation. You are trying to anticipate what a user is likely to do, then offer help or a guide to the user. That is predictive. You are assuming that the user wants to use the system in this particular way, or the person may want to use it in this particular way, and you offer help or offer prompts or guide to the user. For example, one of the ways you can do it is asking the user what he or she wants to do. If the system notices non-interaction within a stipulated time frame, you see it all the time. If you go to a very busy website, okay, and you just don't do anything, your mouse doesn't move, you don't touch your keyboard for it, could be for 60 seconds or 30 seconds depending on how it was programmed. The next thing you would see is a bot prompting you, what do you want to do? Do you want to chat? That is what they call predictive. Why? Because they are trying to prompt you into taking specific action. Now, for descriptive, the descriptive element is it gives assistance to the user by giving a brief description of an icon. For instance, if you go to let's assume, okay, this is, I guess, is recording, so it may not give, but if you go to Microsoft Word, for instance, and you put your your cursor, your mouse point on setting of the icons. It gives okay, very beautiful. It gives you this is called descriptive. Why? It tells you what the icon is going to do. If I take it to the next one, it gives me a brief description of what this icon would do. If I take it to this, the same thing. This one also, it gives me a description of what the icon or the button is expected to do. That is what we mean by what descriptive. Now the Shanna Diamond's 8 rules. Okay, I'll just take them very briefly. Okay, strive for consistency. Consistent sequence of action should always be required in similar situations. Similar situations shouldn't be if, for example, you know, anytime you click on the start button, this is what comes up, regardless of the application that is open. The moment you click on the start button, it comes up. There is a consistency of it. It shouldn't be that when I click on the start button, when PowerPoint is up, it should give me something else. No, that is not consistency, of course. Then another thing is enable frequent use. You know, users should be able to use shortcut like Control S, Control V, Control P, you know, Control X, all the other stuff. Make provisions for that is quite important in your design. Then informative feedback. Don't just give feedback. Okay, that tells nothing. The feedback should be informative. For example, somebody has completed a form, okay, and the person submitted and nothing comes up, and you're wondering, the user is wondering, did he submit or did he not submit? Okay, there should be a kind of message that comes up, oh, your form has been submitted successfully, or your details have been updated successfully. That gives you informative feedback. Then, of course, design dialogue to yield to closure. Don't just, for instance, when that prompt comes up, okay, it should be logical. When you close it, you can now say, click on this to close the message or to remove the message. That is a closure, a dialogue that has yielded what? A closure. Don't just leave it open-ended. There should be a closure. Of course, there should be error handling systems. If somebody clicks something by error, always prompt the person to confirm, especially when the person is doing filling card details and suddenly the person wants to close the page. It's always important that you ask the person for confirmation. That is an error handling mechanism. Do you want to close it or do you want to exit this place? Let the person confirm before taking the person out of that environment. Then there are others. Permits easy reversal of actions. Okay, I should be able to move backward and forward. Your backward button should be okay. Not because I've moved forward from one page to the other, I shouldn't be able to. I have to now start from the beginning in order to get back to the home page. Just a click should be able to take me back to where I want it to be. Support for internal locus of control. Very, very important. Internal control. Don't just allow things to keep running and running and running and running. There should be a time frame where you can say that, okay, you've not done X, Y, Z, you've not completed this, therefore this thing is, we are closing this, or we are giving you time to complete this within this time frame. Reduce short-term memory load. Yes, don't load everything from your ROM. Learn to take it to a more appropriate storage, long-lasting storage component. All right, now these are some of the basic principles. I believe that you've learned so much. I would advise you to go through it because it will help you to design your interfaces. Thank you very much and see you in the next lecture.